The Galactic Academy was a place of learning for the most exceptional students from every corner of the galaxy, located on the serene moon of Varanus. It was a place where peace, knowledge, and cooperation between species were highly valued, and most students took pride in the balance of their interactions. Students like Nyla, a bioluminescent creature from the Zenthari homeworld, had spent years working to master the art of interspecies diplomacy and physical training, learning how to communicate across barriers of biology and culture. It was a peaceful life, one full of soft routines and friendly rivalries. But today, that calm was about to be shattered. As Nyla walked into the gymnasium for her first class of the day, she noticed the tension in the air. It wasn't just her usual pre exercise nerves, it was something else, something darker. The other students were whispering, exchanging uneasy glances as they gathered in their designated areas, preparing for their gym session. But the most unsettling part wasn't the atmosphere of nervousness. It was the rumors that were rippling through the crowd. Heard they're bringing in a death worlder. A death worlder? Mm. Nyla had overheard this whispered exchange more than once, and it sent an electric jolt of fear through her body. Death worlders were the stuff of nightmares for most galactic species, and there were few who hadn't heard the terrifying stories of creatures born from worlds that were all but hellscapes, places where nothing but the strongest survived. What did it mean for the Academy to bring in a Death Worlder? It wasn't even legal for most Death Worlders to be integrated into any kind of normal intergalactic educational system, so why was the Academy making this exception? And why now? Nyla walked into the gym with a knot in her stomach, scanning the room for familiar faces, but they were all avoiding eye contact. Her fellow students seemed to be shying away from a specific corner of the gymnasium, their expressions a mix of anxiety and disbelief. As Nyla's gaze moved across the gym, she saw something that made her freeze. Standing in the doorway, looking entirely out of place, was a figure. He was human. Nyla blinked in disbelief. Humans were rare in this part of the galaxy, but what made her pause wasn't the fact that he was human. It was that he looked utterly unbothered by the hostile atmosphere in the gym. He didn't seem to notice the fear radiating off of the students, nor did he seem at all fazed by the disapproving glances that followed him. The man, no, the Death Worlder, was casually leaning against the doorway, his posture relaxed in a way that seemed to mock the anxious energy in the room. He wore the standard gym uniform, but it looked almost absurd on him, as if it was a loose-fitting afterthought. His body was the wrong shape, the wrong kind of power, and Nyla couldn't help but feel a shiver crawl up her spine. His eyes scanned the room with an intensity that made her feel as though he was sizing them all up. The students around her were whispering frantically now, their voices rising as they realized exactly who or what had just walked into their gym class. Do you think it's true? Is it really a human? Nyla heard Zoke, a towering amphibian from the swamp planet of Eldra, murmur to one of his friends, I can't believe it! Why would they send a Death Worlder here? Tavi, a jittery, almost neurotic Uradan, squeaked, his gills flaring in agitation. Another voice filled with fear responded, What if he decides to play with us? Humans can kill with just a glance, right? Nyla's stomach churned as she listened. The stories about humans from the other species had been enough to make even the bravest of students hesitate in their tracks. They were said to be aggressive, territorial, and unnervingly strong. And this one, this human, he was a Death Worlder, which meant his world was even more dangerous, even more hostile than the rest. Then the human spoke. His voice cut through the murmurs, too loud for the stillness that had taken hold of the gym. Hey, everyone, he said with a casual grin that sent another wave of unease through the group. I'm Logan. Looks like I'll be your new gym partner. Let's get this over with. A chill ran down Nyla's spine. She had never felt so much fear in a simple sentence before. Logan, the Death Worlder, spoke as though he were talking about an everyday occurrence. It was as if he were oblivious to the fact that he was the source of their panic, as if it didn't even occur to him that he might be more dangerous than any of them could possibly imagine. For a moment, there was only stunned silence. The gym teacher, a tall Exthari named Chris, was the first to regain composure. She stepped forward, attempting to keep her voice level, though there was no hiding the tension in her posture. Her tentacle-like limbs flexed with uncertainty as she addressed the room. All right, students, we'll proceed with our exercises as usual. Logan, you'll be participating in the session, but please remember that these students are not equipped for the intensity you might be used to. Logan gave a nonchalant shrug. I'm not here to wreck anyone, he said, though his tone was far too casual. But I don't do easy, so I guess we'll see how things go. Nyla could see the way his words unsettled the others. Zoke, despite his towering frame and broad shoulders, stiffened at the human's words. Javi nearly stumbled over his own feet as he tried to retreat toward the back of the room. There was an electric tension in the air now, a heightened awareness that they were all trapped with a Death Worlder in their midst, and no one had a clue how to handle him. The gym teacher gave a hesitant nod. Very well, but let's take things slow for the sake of the class, okay? Logan's response was a smile that looked too easy, too practiced. Yeah, sure, I can do that. For now. For the next few minutes, the students formed their typical gym groups, but there was a noticeable gap. No one wanted to be near Logan. Their faces were a mix of fear and curiosity, some not wanting to engage with him at all, others exchanging uncertain glances as they tried to figure out how they could interact with a creature like him. Hen Cries looked at the students and made a decision. Nyla, she called, her voice trembling slightly as she made eye contact with the bioluminescent student. You'll pair with Logan for the first activity. Nyla felt her body freeze. Pair with him, the very thought was enough to send her stomach into a dizzying spiral of fear and confusion. But there was no escaping it. The teacher had spoken, and the entire class was watching. Reluctantly, Nyla walked toward Logan, her bioluminescent skin flickering with the uncertainty she felt inside. She swallowed hard before speaking. Hi. I guess we're partners now? Logan looked her up and down, his eyes flickering with mild interest. Yeah, looks like it. So, what are we doing first? Before she could answer, Chris instructed them to begin with a basic grappling drill, a test of strength and agility. It was a warm-up, something simple meant to loosen the students up. But as Nyla positioned herself, trying to calm her nerves, she realized just how much of a mismatch this was going to be. She might be one of the stronger students in the class, but against a Death Worlder? No contest, the whistle blew and they both charged toward each other. What happened next was almost too fast to process. Logan was a blur of movement, his body too quick and too powerful for Nyla to anticipate. She tried to grab hold of him with her 6 limbs, but he dodged her effortlessly, slipping past her defenses with a fluidity that made her feel as though she were moving through molasses. His speed was terrifying, and before she could even react, he had flipped her onto her back with minimal effort. Nyla lay on the floor, her breath stolen by the sudden intensity of the move. She felt a hot flush of humiliation rise within her. She was supposed to be one of the best in the class, but this human, this Death Worlder, had defeated her so easily, so effortlessly. You good? Logan's voice, casual and teasing, reached her ears as she tried to regain her composure. Nyla pushed herself to her feet, blinking back the sting of defeat. Yeah, fine. I wasn't expecting that. Logan grinned, a smile that could have been disarming if it wasn't so terrifying. I'm not surprised, most people aren't. She could hear the slight edge in his voice now. an undertone of something that wasn't quite arrogance, but wasn't quite modesty either. It was as though he wasn't used to being challenged at all, as though the idea that someone could possibly be his equal was beyond his comprehension. For a brief moment, Nyla realized that this Death Worlder wasn't just dangerous because of his strength. He was dangerous because he was so used to being this way. She swallowed hard, trying to regain her focus as she stepped back into the arena. This wouldn't be the last time they crossed paths, not by a long shot. The gym was tense as Logan stood, waiting for the next exercise to begin. His posture was relaxed, but his presence was an unspoken challenge to every student in the room. Nyla could see the way his eyes scanned the others, the way his body moved with a grace that seemed unnatural for someone of his size. Despite his casual appearance, there was a predator-like quality to him, something wild and untamed that made every student in the room instinctively pull back. The whispers hadn't stopped since his arrival. Everywhere she turned, Nyla could hear fragments of conversations about him, about how humans were said to be ruthless, how their strength was beyond comprehension, how a Death Worlder like him would be impossible to face in a real fight. The rumors were always terrifying, but seeing him here, in person, made it all feel much more real. Nyla felt a cold sweat forming on the back of her neck. It wasn't just that Logan had destroyed her in the grappling exercise, it was the way he had made it look so easy, so casual. He had barely broken a sweat, while she had felt every muscle in her body strain to keep up. And now, as the gym class continued, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow out of her depth, that no matter how hard she tried, she was never going to be able to compete with someone like him. The students around her felt the same way. Even Zoke, the massive amphibian who was usually calm and composed, had been unnerved by Logan's display of strength. The large alien stood at the back of the gym, his body tense, his sharp eyes flickering nervously toward the human every now and then. Javi, the jittery Jordan, had practically melted into the wall in fear, his gills flaring and closing with every deep breath he took. And then there was Chris, the gym teacher, who had tried to be calm but was clearly unsettled by Logan's presence. She had tried to maintain control to keep the class moving forward, but Nyla could see the way her tentacles were trembling as she adjusted the schedule for the day. There was no denying it now. Logan, the Death Worlder, had upended everything they thought they knew about strength and survival. "All right, everyone," Chris said, her voice a little more strained than usual. "We're moving on to the next exercise. This time, we'll focus on coordination and agility. It's a bit more subtle than pure strength, so everyone should be able to participate without worrying about being overpowered." Nyla tried to breathe through the growing sense of dread in her chest. Coordination and agility. It sounded simple enough, but the thought of being paired with Logan again was enough to make her stomach twist. What if she was humiliated again? What if he made her look even worse than before? There was no way to avoid it. She had to face him. Chris clapped her tentacles to get their attention. "Logan, Nyla, you're up." Nyla's heart skipped a beat. This was it. She took a deep breath and moved toward Logan, her legs feeling unsteady beneath her. The human was already walking toward her, his eyes scanning her as though she were another puzzle for him to figure out. She noticed the way his expression softened, as if he were trying to read her, trying to understand what was going through her mind. "Ready for round two?" Logan asked, his voice casual but with an edge that made Nyla's skin prickle. She hesitated for a moment before nodding. "I guess so. Don't worry," Logan said with a grin. "I'm not going to break you this time. Promise." Nyla wasn't sure whether to take comfort in his words or to be even more afraid. He sounded too relaxed, too sure of himself, as though the concept of failure didn't even exist for him. Logan was like a force of nature. He didn't try to fit into the academy's system. He didn't care about the rules that governed their interactions. He was a product of his world, a place where everything was an obstacle to overcome. To him, this gym class probably felt like a game. And everyone else? They were the pieces. Chris stood off to the side, ready to supervise. She was clearly doing her best to keep things calm, but Nyla could tell that even she wasn't entirely sure what to expect. They had never had a death worlder in the class before. No one had been prepared for this. All right, Chris said, giving them a brief overview of the exercise. You'll both move through the obstacle course. It's designed to test speed, agility, and precision. The goal is to get through it as quickly as possible without making mistakes. No strength is required, just agility.
Nyla nodded, her nerves bubbling beneath the surface. It seemed simple enough, but as she looked at Logan, she couldn't help but wonder how someone like him could possibly have any difficulty with something so basic. After all, he had dominated the grappling exercise with no effort at all. "Ladies first," Logan said, gesturing toward the course. Nyla gave him a forced smile before stepping up to the starting line. The obstacle course was set up with various challenges: narrow beams to balance on, moving platforms to jump across, and tunnels to crawl through. It was meant to test the students' coordination, and for most of the students, it was a challenge they could handle. But Nyla wasn't sure how this was going to play out with Logan. She took a deep breath and began moving. The first part of the course was easy enough, a narrow beam that she had to walk across. Her 6 arms kept her balance as she moved forward, her bioluminescence glowing softly as she concentrated. She had done this exercise 100 times before, but she couldn't stop the nagging feeling that Logan was watching her every move, waiting for her to slip up. She made it across the beam without incident, but as she approached the moving platforms, she hesitated. The platforms were tricky. They moved in unpredictable patterns, and it required quick reflexes to jump from one to the next without falling off. Nyla watched the platforms shift and move, mentally calculating the best time to jump. She made her move, leaping onto the first platform and then onto the second, but as she prepared to make her final jump, she misjudged the timing and the platform shifted beneath her feet. She fell, landing hard on the mat below. "Ah," she muttered, her bioluminescent skin flickering in embarrassment. Logan was standing at the edge of the course, watching her with an unreadable expression. "Nice try," he said, his voice oddly encouraging. "You're almost there." Nyla shot him a glare, wiping the dust from her uniform as she stood up. She felt her pride sting. She had failed, and of course Logan had seen it all. "Your turn," she said through clenched teeth, trying to keep her voice steady. Logan nodded, stepping up to the starting line with a confidence that made Nyla's stomach churn. He moved with the kind of fluidity that only someone from a death world could possess. As he approached the narrow beam, he didn't hesitate. He didn't even seem to think about it. He just moved. His balance was perfect, and the beam didn't even wobble beneath him as he crossed it. Nyla could only watch in awe as he made it to the moving platforms. His movements were so precise, so effortless, it was like watching a predator stalk its prey. Every motion calculated, every step a guarantee of success. He moved from platform to platform with ease, never once faltering or losing his footing. He made it to the end of the course in half the time it had taken Nyla to get through, and he didn't even look winded. "See?" Logan said with a grin, turning to look at her. "I told you I wasn't going to break you, but I guess I might have just broken the record instead." Nyla didn't know whether to laugh or throw something at him. He had completely demolished her performance, and he seemed to be enjoying every second of it. For a moment, there was a silence between them. Nyla wasn't sure what to say, but Logan spoke up again, this time in a softer tone. "Look, I'm not trying to make you feel bad," he said, his grin faltering for just a second. "I know it looks like I'm just showing off, but that's not the point. I get that you all don't know what it's like where I come from. I'm used to living in a world where everything is trying to kill me. The only way to survive is to be faster, stronger, and more aware than anything else around you. I wasn't trying to make you feel bad. I don't know how to turn it off." Nyla stood there, processing his words. There was something different about Logan when he wasn't trying to intimidate or show off. He seemed almost human. The Death Worlder persona he wore so easily started to crack, just for a moment. It wasn't an apology, but it was something else, something she hadn't expected from him. "Maybe I'll take it down a notch next time," Logan added with a shrug, though he still had that grin on his face. Nyla nodded, still trying to figure out how to feel about him. He wasn't the monster she had imagined, but that didn't change the fact that he was dangerous in ways she didn't fully understand. And now she had to face the fact that this Death Worlder wasn't just someone she had to fear. He was someone she was going to have to learn to deal with. The following days at the academy felt different, heavy with an unspoken tension. Nyla couldn't help but feel the presence of Logan everywhere. He was still the topic of every conversation, but now it wasn't just whispers of fear or curiosity. It was more complicated. They all knew that Logan was a Death Worlder, a being from a place so dangerous and hostile that no other species could fully comprehend it. And yet, despite the stories that haunted every conversation, there was something about him that defied their expectations. Logan had changed the game. As the days passed, Nyla noticed the shifts in her classmates. Some were more openly curious about Logan, trying to engage with him, asking questions, testing their own limits in the gym, pushing themselves to become better in his presence. Zoc, the massive amphibian, had even started working out harder than ever, challenging himself with exercises he used to avoid. Javi had grown more confident, though his nervous energy still remained, yet he seemed to be trying harder now. The fear of Logan had transformed into something else, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. They weren't just afraid anymore. There was something in the way they all looked at him now, something like respect. And then there was Nyla. After their last encounter in the gym, things had become more awkward between her and Logan. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had become just another challenge for him, a creature to test his superiority against. At first, she thought he might have been trying to be kind, trying to temper his natural abilities so as not to completely overwhelm her, but it felt distant, as if there was something he was hiding beneath the surface. She wasn't sure if she could trust him, but she had no choice. The academy had decided to integrate him fully into the curriculum. He wasn't going away. No, in fact, he was becoming an unwelcome fixture, a constant reminder of everything she and her classmates had been taught to fear. One morning, as Nyla entered the gym for another round of training, she couldn't help but notice Logan already there, practicing some intricate combination of strikes and blocks, his movements so precise and effortless that they almost looked choreographed. His body was fluid, like water flowing through the air. Every movement was calculated, every motion a step toward complete control. It was mesmerizing in a way that made her skin crawl. When he noticed her entering, his eyes flicked over to her, and for a brief moment they locked eyes. He didn't say anything, but there was something in the way he looked at her that made her heart race. It wasn't challenging, it wasn't mocking. It was almost studying, as if he was waiting for her to make the next move. And Nyla, despite her reservations, could feel something inside her stirring. She tried to ignore it. She tried to focus on the task at hand, but Logan was a constant distraction. In the back of her mind, she couldn't help but wonder if he saw her as nothing more than another obstacle to overcome, something to dominate. When Chris entered the gym, the students immediately went quiet. She had been training them for years, but today she looked visibly more nervous than usual. Her tentacles shifted anxiously as she addressed the class. "All right, today's session will focus on defense techniques, specifically evasion and counterattacking. Each of you will face off against Logan in a series of drills. These will test your agility, reaction time, and strategy. Remember, this is about learning, not defeating your opponent." Nyla's stomach tightened. She had been hoping for some more time to prepare, but now there was no avoiding it. She was going to have to face Logan again. The thought of it made her insides churn. She had barely managed to keep up the last time. What if she failed again? What if she embarrassed herself in front of everyone? The students took their positions, lining up in pairs. One by one, they faced Logan, taking turns to engage with him. Zoc was up first. The massive amphibian charged forward with surprising speed, his limbs extending like a blur. Logan didn't move at first. He simply stood there, waiting. Zoc struck, his movements powerful, but Logan avoided him with a simple sidestep, his body twisting fluidly, never once breaking a sweat. It was as if Logan were toying with him, evading every strike with ease. Zoc grew frustrated, his attacks becoming more aggressive, more wild, but Logan was always one step ahead, always 2 moves ahead. It was clear who the dominant one was here. Nyla winced. She couldn't help but feel sympathy for Zoc, who was now panting heavily, trying to catch his breath. Logan was relentless but never cruel. He didn't taunt or show off. He simply moved, allowing Zoc to strike but never giving him the satisfaction of landing a blow. After a few more minutes, Logan gave Zoc a nod, signaling that the drill was over. "Good effort," Logan said with a grin, though it lacked any real warmth. Zoc stepped back, defeated, but there was no shame in his posture. Logan wasn't a monster, he was simply better, and that was a bitter pill for most of them to swallow. Nyla's own turn was fast approaching. She felt her stomach twist as she stepped forward. Her legs felt heavy as she took her place opposite Logan, the space between them stretching out like an abyss. "Ready?" Logan asked, his tone too casual. His eyes glinted with something almost playful, as if he were waiting for her to make a move, expecting her to be the one to initiate. Nyla hesitated. She didn't know what to do. In the previous exercises, she had tried to be quick, to rely on her agility, but Logan was faster, his movements so precise that he barely needed to think. Her usual tricks wouldn't work on him. She had to be smarter, faster, more unpredictable. But could she outthink him? Could she even keep up? "Whenever you're ready," Logan said, his voice the same, as though the tension didn't even exist for him. She took a deep breath and launched herself forward, using all her limbs to move with a speed and precision she had never before attempted. She struck first, aiming for his midsection, hoping to catch him off guard. But Logan was already stepping back, sidestepping her strike with such ease that it almost made her dizzy. He countered immediately, a swift jab to her side that caught her off guard. The impact wasn't hard enough to hurt, but it was enough to knock her off balance, sending her sprawling to the mat. He groaned, frustration flooding through her as she pushed herself back to her feet. Logan's grin hadn't faltered. "Not bad, but you need to think faster," he said, his voice calm and even, almost like a teacher rather than a peer. Nyla wiped the sweat from her brow. She wasn't sure if she could handle this. Logan was too good, too fast, too strong. Every attempt she made to outmaneuver him felt futile. She had no advantage over him. And yet, something in her refused to give up. She had to try again. She couldn't let him see her fail. Not like this. This time, she didn't rush in. She held back, waiting, studying his movements, trying to find some pattern, some flaw. Logan had no intention of giving her the opportunity to think. He lunged forward this time, faster than she had anticipated, his movements so fluid that they seemed almost supernatural. She dodged, but barely, twisting her body out of the way just in time to avoid a hit. The moment she landed, she countered, using her agility to get low and aim for his legs, trying to throw him off balance. Logan's eyes widened, just slightly. He had been caught off guard. For the first time she had managed to get close. She pressed forward, her limbs reaching for his legs, aiming to trip him. Logan stumbled back, but instead of falling, he rolled, his body moving with a fluidity that was almost impossible to keep up with. But Nyla had the advantage now. She kept her momentum, striking again, this time managing to grab hold of his arm. Logan's grin faded, replaced by a look of genuine interest. "Not bad," he said, his voice still steady but with a note of approval that Nyla hadn't expected. "You're learning, you're thinking, but you're still too slow." Then she could react. Logan twisted out of her grasp, flipping her onto the mat with a speed that left her breathless. She landed hard, the wind knocked out of her, but she couldn't help but laugh. He had caught her again, but this time it wasn't just a reminder of her failure. It was a lesson. She lay there for a moment, staring up at the ceiling, her chest heaving with exertion. Logan stood over her, his expression softer now, almost contemplative. "You've got potential," he said, extending a hand to help her up. "But you've got to stop worrying about failure. You can't think about how to beat me, you've got to think about how to outsmart me." Nyla took his hand and let him pull her to her feet. She looked at him, really looked at him for the first time. He wasn't just some unapproachable, dangerous being. He was someone who, for all his strength and skill, had his own struggles. He wasn't perfect. And maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to be either. "Thanks," she said, still trying to catch her breath. Logan gave her a quick nod before stepping back. "No problem, just keep pushing. That's all you can do." Nyla stood there, her legs trembling, but something inside her had shifted. She wasn't going to be defeated by fear. And maybe, just maybe, this Death Worlder had a little more to teach her than she had thought.